Hello and welcome to The Drum. I'm Peter Lloyd. Coming up tonight, Bob Brown's vision for Australia, including a global parliament, why all sides of politics are worried about a foreign buyout of Australian land, and what does the deadly Taliban attack on a hotel in Kabul mean for the war on terror. Our panel tonight, the former New South Wales Liberal leader Kerry Chikarovski, John Barron from ABC News Radio, and in Melbourne, the editor of the Drum website, Jonathan Green. Well, as the Greens are preparing for their numbers to grow in the Senate this week, their leader has given an idea of how the minor party plans to use its power. In a wide-ranging interview to the National Press Club, address to the National Press Club, Bob Brown has condemned the level of profits from mining companies heading overseas. He says the research commissioned by the Greens shows in the next 5 years, $50 billion will go straight into the coffers of foreign investors.
This mining industry, ladies and gentlemen, is largely foreign-owned. While Australia gets jobs, export income, royalties and company tax from our minerals, the foreign owners get profits, dividends, capital appreciation and influence. Most of Treasury's planned super profits tax is now due to end up in the deep, deep pockets of billionaires overseas in Switzerland, London, Calcutta and Beijing, rather than in Australian schools, hospitals and railways. Some $50 billion reaped from Australia's mineral resources will be sent overseas as dividends to foreign owners.
Well, the Minerals Council has accused the Greens of being xenophobic.
This is a pretty crude attempt to capitalise on the politics of xenophobia to essentially prosecute the Greens' real agenda, which is to introduce a tax on the industry that would tax it out of existence. Senator Brown has campaigned on closing down the coal industry and banning uranium mining. He's not about developing this industry and sharing the wealth for the benefit of all Australians. He's actually about closing it down, and that's what the real agenda is here.
Well, Senator Brown says he'll push for an expansion of the mining tax to cover gold and uranium, and the scrapping of the company tax cut for big business. The Prime Minister says there will be no changes. Kerry Chikarovski, you were nodding vigorously all through that.
Yeah, look, I think it's an interesting position for Bob Brown. I mean, I think that Bob Brown is very genuine. I think he's very committed. The question is, how political is he going to be? Because the issue that will face him, and this won't be just on the mining tax, it'll be on everything that he's going to do, is how hard he pushes. Because the problem he's got is that there is a hung parliament in the lower house, that the government is reliant on the goodwill of a number of independents. If Bob Brown pushes the government too hard on all of these issues, he may in fact force the independents to change their allegiance and either to hand government over to the coalition or indeed force the government to an election. Now, if there's an election, then Bob Brown may control the Senate, but he won't control the agenda. So he will have to make and the Greens collectively will have to make a very strong decision about, do we take what's a reasonable result or do we push too hard, and in doing so, by pushing too hard, force a change of government? Because I suspect that dealing with Tony Abbott and the coalition on some of these issues, they won't be even in a position anywhere near as amenable to what the Greens want as the Labor government is at the moment.
That's right. John Barron, there was almost a laundry list of agenda items from Bob Brown today. What do you think of the analysis of Kerry on this one?
Well, certainly there is a very strong argument that says while the river of gold is flowing, we should all get our hands full, and that we should potentially also not leave all that money for the current government or even the next government, and that we should be looking at some sort of a sovereign wealth fund, a future fund, so that, because as we know from history, these resources booms, they can continue for a decade or more. Maybe this will be an even longer double boom, but either way, we're going to want this money in 10, 15, 20 years from now. Bob Brown's point about the amount of money that is going offshore, a lot of it is, but more of it is staying onshore. More than 60% of the profits that BHP Billiton is turning is going into the pockets of shareholders in this country. A lot of people with superannuation funds that are very heavy in these sort of resources stocks. So a lot of it is staying here. Some of it that goes into the coffers of Xstrata in Switzerland, well, with the banking laws being what they are over there, we don't actually know. There's a lack of transparency as to exactly how much of this is going. But so there's been a lot of toing and froing over these numbers today from this actuary in Tasmania that Bob Brown uses as the basis for this analysis. But at the end of the day, everybody agrees there's a lot of money there. The miners can probably afford to pay a bit more, whether it's in royalties or in onshore profits. But how this all gets nutted out in the new political paradigm as of next week in Canberra when the Greens take over the balance is going to be interesting to see.
OK, we'll go to Melbourne next. Jonathan Green, your reaction to today's speech?
Well, the politics are interesting, and I think that the politics around the tax especially we saw a taste of last time round with the big campaign run by the miners, very much on this issue of we're Aussies